Welcome to Grow Sessions. This is Tony with TSRgrow. I've got my good friend Dave Barton. Dave, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Tony. How are you? I
I'm
missed you at some of the sessions recently and the European. I know you've been traveling crazy times. How you?
yeah,
How you?
it's been a little crazy. So I mean, it's we're jumping around from different trade shows and then attacking the European market. But why
Yeah,
don't you
awesome.
go ahead and give yourself a little intro about who you are and where you came from and like how you got
Yeah,
kind of got into the cannabis world.
for sure. Well, it's probably started 4 or 5 years ago with a midlife crisis, age 40, where I've kind of figured out that I wanted to get back into cannabis and started to realize that there's a whole industry happening around it. Legally, not just in the US and Canada, but in the UK and in Europe as well. It made me think, well, maybe there's some opportunity here for me to ply my trade. So again, for a bit of context, I've been a content writer, copywriter, PR man for the last 19 years
Hmm.
or so. Just gonna throw that out
Nice.
there. I'm showing my age. Yeah, so I kind of started out just writing about everything from construction equipment to energy efficient lighting to food service. I mean, a real kind of mixed bag of stuff that I've kind of sort of tackled editorially over the years. I guess I went freelance from full-time job about 7 years ago, and I started writing more and more stuff around sort of technology and things like that, SaaS platforms. And again, then I started to realize that actually we could do some more stuff in the cannabis space because that industry seems to be coming on, and hence Thermidor was born. So again, it was a way for me to kind of ply my trade as a copywriter within the burgeoning international cannabis sector. But again, it's really given me an opportunity to create other content. I've started my own podcast and
I love
you
it.
know go to videos and things like that. When we go to shows, we create videos and like to talk to good people like yourself doing things like this, and just really trying to get a steer on what's happening internationally, because it feels like the whole world is in you know starting to see the light where cannabis is concerned. So I
I,
mean, for me,
I can't
that's
agree
that's
more. I
fascinating.
agree with you. Like the whole world, and if people are pigeonholing themselves into a certain market, like a certain one little corner of their niche, which is fine, but I think that the world is exploding in the cannabis business, and the medicinal side of it just coming out so strong, and all the benefits and the health benefits and all the how it was kind of pushed down, to it was such an underground thing for so many years, and it was so quiet if someone used it or they didn't talk about it too much. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a great way to just get out there. I'm glad like we were able to connect and meet up over last year in Europe, and then we've been friends for well over a year now, and just kind of
Yeah.
chatting it through. But can you give us a little like maybe some info, or what is your insight on like some of the changes in the European market right now?
Well, I suppose the big news, as you well know, is Germany.
Oh
So
yeah,
they have done the first stage of, was it the Can G kind of proposal, where that's sort of been pushed through the German parliament. So essentially, there's legalization light happening in
yeah. It's
Germany,
almost like
which
I kind of like I the way for me to best understand it, I look at it. It's like it's a co-op kind of type situation where they're growing. Their social club, I guess we'll call it. They have a
yeah.
certain amount of members and they're allowed to grow X amount of kilograms per year. And then, and they have their members are the ones who can they buy. They don't sell to the general public unless you're a member of their group, almost like
Yes.
co-op. You're part of the co-op and you get portions of it.
Yep.
That's like how I understand it, or maybe I best digest it.
No, absolutely. I think that's the case. And again, I think a few plants for home grow and things like that. So again,
Yeah.
it feels like, well, it's still progress. It's all happening, but it's not, complete, free for all kind of market in the same way. But I don't think anywhere is, honestly, in the kind of, at least in the regulated markets around the world.
No, no, I think
I,
think you're right on that for sure.
so it's interesting to see. And again, it's the first major, and I don't want to do a disservice to countries like Malta or Luxembourg, but Germany is the economic powerhouse of Europe.
Oh,
Let's
for
just be
sure.
honest, 86 million people or something. So again, it makes sense for a lot of people from around the world working in industry like yourselves from the US and Canada and places like that to be thinking, this is our entry point into Europe. So
Agreed.
I really think I mean, I would have thought that was sort of reflected in. Did you feel that in Berlin this year? Was there a kind of renewed optimism? Because I
I
was
think
there,
so.
yeah,
I
because
think
I
there
was
was
there
a lot,
last
there's a
year.
lot of
Yeah.
buzz, a lot of happiness.
Hmm.
I think that there's other people from other countries. There was quite a few other countries that were represented there, people that were speaking with us, because they feel that if Germany, not if, but when and how they roll it out is going to kind of dictate how some of the other countries in the EU will progress forward. Not saying they'll do a social club model, but I think that's like the first steps, because Germany does have a medical program similar to like England and
Yeah.
other countries.
Yeah, no,
It's a
absolutely.
prescription based thing, but I definitely it was very, very, everybody's happy to talk and they're excited, and they don't, like, we use the term, I'm sure they don't know what they don't know. So we're trying to help people out, trying to understand, okay, it's not like, hey, I can get a cannabis social club and I'm going to get 300 or 500 members or whatever it is, and I'm going to charge them X amount of dollars. So there's more process to it. They're like, hey, we want to talk about, this type of solution or that type of solution, where I'm happy to talk with them always. I think cannabis is so exciting, but I think it's a
Yeah.
lot of education, and there's some groundwork that needs to be laid out, like right now, as people are getting excited and doing it, getting into the cannabis industry, into that space. I think that they need to figure some things out. We can't just throw up a grow. They gotta have power. There's still some town and municipal approvals, I think,
Yeah, no,
that
absolutely.
have to
I've
go
been
through.
hearing that Bavaria, obviously, which was the kind of the sort of powerhouse of southern Germany, Munich, and
Yep.
still very much where a lot of the money is, as I understand it, in Germany, sort of richer area. There's a lot of reluctance or hesitancy around how that's going to be implemented, is, opposition to it. So that'd be interesting, because again, you go to Berlin, it's very kind of, it's got that kind of San Francisco vibe a little bit.
For
It's
sure.
kind of lefty. It's kind of cool. It's kind of a nice place to hang. Everyone's pretty chill, and even if even in times where cannabis was illegal, it's still very much you know people openly consume. It's not a big deal. It's never
No, I
has been.
agree.
It's a very, but again, I guess this is what we kind of easy to underestimate. But I suppose it's similar in the US. You have states, well, we have they're legal, but in municipalities can completely, well, we don't want dispensaries here,
No,
which always seems like
agreed.
a really strange thing.
I think that'll happen in Germany too. It was surprising how many funding partners or people that they want to help build out these social clubs, and they want to lease them, and they're looking at the leasing model, like, okay, if we help build it out, we own the building and build it out, and we put a social club here. And when I say social club, it's like a social grow. I don't think there's a consumption on
Yeah,
property. I
it's
think
it's
it's,
not in the same way that, for example, you would have in Barcelona, like the
yeah,
social club,
there's like,
which
it's
is
almost like a
consumption
pattern.
lounge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
consumption lounge, but they call it a social club. And I
Mm,
think there's a misconstrued in the environment, saying, oh geez, is it like you say, a consumption lounge? It's not. It's just that you're part of a club that
mm.
grows for you, and your allotment is X amount of grams per month or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't, the number isn't right on the top
I
of my head.
think
I
that's
think it's
kind
okay.
of what the sort of coffee shop sort of thing in the Netherlands was kind of supposed to be, as I understand it. I mean, obviously, there's a new kind of pilot in play now. Actually,
Oh yeah.
the reason I didn't go to Berlin, I was actually in the Netherlands the week before at the Cannabis Summit in
Yep.
The Hague. And that was quite interesting because, again, it was very much people talking about, how the Dutch experiment's progressing. People had the president of the kind of Dutch Coffee Shop Association talking about the new kind of, they call it the Dutch experiment,
Yep,
which is
they
quite
are.
interesting. So they've got, so again, hearing about that, and then hearing from people from Belgium and from sort of surrounding countries talking around, the appetite for, what will happen next in the kind of Germany's sort of neighborhood, if you like. So, what's going to happen in Benelux, maybe in France. And, that there was a bit of speculation around that. But I still think, it feels like what Germany is doing is kind of what Netherlands probably set out to do a while
Mhm.
ago, whenever it was 40, 50 years ago with the kind of coffee shop,
Yep.
the original kind of coffee shop thing. But that has become, well, actually, the supply outstrips, the demand outstrips the supply. You're supposed to sell what you can grow on site. That's never going to be sustainable, especially
No,
when there's
it's
that much demand, probably mostly from tourists. And I think they like to point the finger at British tourists, which, again, it's probably not, too far from the truth, if I'm honest. But
they're not wrong. They're
but
not
again,
wrong.
it's kind of like, well, again, the whole place hasn't fallen apart, has it? I mean, yeah, there's always concerns when there's tourists, when there's kind of, alcohol free flowing and, behavior, etc. You think, well, you understand why, places like Amsterdam are sort of cracking down a little bit more on antisocial behavior. But do I think that stems from cannabis specifically? No, I think
No, well,
it's a multitude of things. It might be people who are there for a good time and are consuming cannabis among other things, But I feel
no, yeah,
like,
they're trying to like pigeonhole or
yeah,
kind of place blame on it, and it's not. I would say that. I mean, it's my opinion, but I don't think that, you don't really meet people smoking weed and having cannabis they're not causing problems. They're just kind of chilling out and hanging.
Well,
Versus
this
they're
is
not
kind of
getting rough
it.
and rowdy. Like if you're drinking bottles of tequila, I mean, I think you have a whole nother book of
Well,
challenges.
absolutely, man, absolutely. But no, it's true, isn't it? But I feel like, what Germany are putting in place now is kind of like, well, we can sell what we can grow, and but how I suppose they have to regulate the numbers for the actual who's going to join. They have to be registered in that area as a resident.
Yep.
I guess there's going to be a lot more stringency around it,
There's
which
going to
will
be
be
some
interesting to
rules,
see.
which is okay
Yeah.
though. I think that having
Uh,
some rules and definition isn't a terrible thing.
no, absolutely not. But I think again, as long as there's an openness to wanting to be able to review those and say, okay, what's working, what isn't, when there's no point kind of upholding, well, you know, policies where it just feels like they're getting in the way of progress. And you can, again, it's always two steps forward, one step back sometimes, isn't it? But I feel like,
Agreed.
this is definite step in the right direction for Germany. And I think, again, it's almost like if they get the legislation, if they get the framework right, then that's like, well, within 5 years, you could have, large number of Central, Western, and Eastern European countries, fully legalizing recreational cannabis,
And
which
I
would be
like the way that
fantastic to see.
you actually bring up a good thing where here in the States, when like one state does a good launch or a rollout of a cannabis program, be it medical, then adult use, um,
Mhm.
where like each state can write their own legislation and kind of recreate the wheel. Where you brought up a good point, where if Germany does it and it launches the right way, and actually it's a nice rollout, other
Mhm.
countries will follow suit, probably without changing too much. They'll just follow what Germany did, and it'll kind of have a good framework. Where here in the
Mhm.
States is there's states that did great rollouts, and there's other ones that are just they're just not so good. I mean, without placing blame or saying there's some
No, no,
states
no. But again,
just they're in their
it's
own way.
exactly. I mean, I was talking to a guy in Belgium earlier today, and he was telling me, CBD flower is huge there, but medical cannabis, I mean, obviously, you know, illicit market cannabis is hugely popular, so again, that's always the argument, just legalize it so we can tax it, etc. Government makes money, everybody's happy, again, in theory. But again, the idea that a medical program is a precursor to a kind of recreational program, that's what I've always
Agreed.
thought has been the case, and it kind of has been, but apparently not so much in Belgium, which again I found interesting. I don't know the actual kind of legal implications and so forth, but again, hearing that was like, well, so you don't feel like medical has a role to play in the sort of journey towards recreational cannabis, which again is kind of being
It's
debated
interesting.
in
Yeah,
the
that is
halls of
interesting.
power in Belgium. But
What
yeah,
is
but that's kind of, yeah.
what's the state of like what are they doing in the UK? Like I know that you and I chatted about that, but maybe
Yeah,
explain a little
so
bit
I
what happens
mean,
in the
we
UK
have,
with cannabis.
it's almost like medical cannabis is the best or worst kept secret depending on how you look at it here in the UK. We're a nation of 67-ish million people, and we have between 30 and 40,000 medical cannabis patients. Now, I think there's several reasons why that's the case. I
That
think
seems very small.
well, exactly. It's compared to Australia, which is 25 million, they have something like 600,000 patients.
Yeah.
It's insane. The reasons are, I think, again, it's a good or badly kept secret. People just don't know that medical cannabis, is legal, despite the best efforts of a lot of the organizations and the clinics themselves that we have here.
Think there's some
And
stigma tied to it, and people are still a little
yeah,
bit intimidated by the stigma.
oh, absolutely. I think, but again, apparently, I can't remember the statistics, but I was reading that there's nearly 2 million people self-medicating through the illicit market here. So
Interesting.
again, that, if you can kind of get those users on board, it's like, well, actually, that adds significantly more, numbers to the equation. So what's the problem? Why aren't they doing that? Well, again, it comes down to what the sort of situation is in terms of how you get prescribed medical cannabis here,
Yep.
which is, again, there's a set number of conditions and things like that. I mean, you go on any sort of clinic's website here in the UK, whether it be Cantourage or Momedica or Curaleaf or something like that, and you'll see kind of neurological, psychological, pain related, cancer related, all of the different things. You kind of have had to at least tried 2 different treatments for your particular condition, qualifying condition, and I think that's the sort of stumbling block for a lot of people, as in, like, so in my case, I'm a medical cannabis patient. I've tried antidepressants and cognitive behavioral therapy, so that counts as the 2 things that I've kind of gone through over the years to treat my sort of OCD. So again, it was a fairly painless process for me, but that's only because I qualified, and I've heard other people go, well, I may or may not, and I think to varying degrees of success. And it can't be prescribed. You're going to be prescribed by a specialist doctor as well. You can't just go to your GP. I mean,
Okay.
again, we're very much used to, we're very fortunate here in the UK to have the National Health Service, the NHS. For all the criticisms that the media throw at it, it's still free healthcare, for the entire population, which again, I'm speaking to a guy who lives in the US, so it seems insane, I'm guessing. But
Oh yeah.
people just aren't used to paying for healthcare stuff here. And that's
So when you have to
part of
go
the
to a
issue.
specialist, you have to have a special, like you're paying an additional fee to your
Well,
national.
absolutely. You're paying around £100 just to kind of register. So, what's that, 120 bucks,
Yeah,
whatever, so
120.
it's not,
I think it's like
it's
120 US or
yeah,
122
something.
US.
So again, it's expensive. And then every time you do a call, you have to pay an additional sort of 50, 60, maybe £70 or something like that for the prescription itself. Then that could be, well, I think it's around, what, for 10 grams, you're probably looking at between sort of 80 and £100. So you start to see those numbers stack up. Whereas if you were prescribed something by your GP here and you went to your local pharmacy to get, whether it be your over-the-counter medication or your prescription, you're looking at, there's a nominal fee of £10. So
Interesting. Yeah. So
again,
it's like a what do they call it? Like a copay.
yeah, so
A
yeah,
small copay.
I mean that's just the prescription charge. It just increases incrementally each year, but again, that's the nominal fee that as long as you're working and you have money, there's special dispensation for the elderly and people unemployed and things like that on low incomes. But for the most part, the majority of people are just paying that low fee to access their medication on a monthly basis or whatever it is.
Interesting.
So
Is the cannabis sold in the UK? Is it grown in the UK, or is it being imported from other
no,
countries?
my understanding is that I think it's changing, but everything has to be imported. So,
Okay.
for example, I get I have my organic Dutchman maple Kush here. Where
Is
does
it
it
does
hail
it come
from?
in as flour? I mean,
It
is
comes,
it
I
are they
mean, yeah,
selling
absolutely, it comes in as
flour,
flour.
pills?
It's imported by, yeah, but the company itself is in Ontario, Canada. So there we
Oh,
go.
interesting.
So again, everything that is put into the market is, in the medical market, and I think in the CBD market, it has to be imported. But I think the UK is apparently one of the biggest exporters and growers of medical cannabis, I think, globally, but that all gets exported. So again, there's, what we can and can't do is it's, as we call it, arse about face is
Yeah,
the only
that's
correct
super
expression.
interesting. Um,
So we have a very, yeah.
how do you think going about as we're just sitting here, I'm just thinking about things in the UK, like that's so neat. What do you think the steps are, the next steps in the UK to make, is there any plans for making it adult use or adult use
I
recreation,
mean,
or how they're registering? Are they chatting about it?
I mean, it's not really something that's on the political agenda in any meaningful way, unfortunately. I mean, there is like in parliamentary groups, there are politicians that are sympathetic to the cause. The organisations like the Cannabis Industry Council, who are very much involved, FAS, who are very much involved in that conversation with government. But I mean, what we have right now, we have a fairly right-leaning government. The Conservative Party have been in power for a good sort of 15 years or something like that. You know, we have a general election, as you guys do
Hmm.
in the US. We have that coming up probably around similar time, November time or something
Yep,
like that.
that's what it is here too.
And I think it's going to be, so they're kind of right leaning. The other party who's most likely to, take over is the Labour Party, who are traditionally more left leaning, but they've got to appeal to that kind of almost like right center kind of voter base. So it's just not going to happen at all in the next couple of administrations. Whoever ends up in number 10 Downing Street, I don't think it's even on the agenda, unfortunately. But again, we could be probably 8 to 10 years. But again, I think the separation from the EU, I think a lot of people feel like that could be an opportunity for the UK to kind of do its own thing, particularly where cannabis is concerned. It's like we're not constrained, but again, we look across the North Sea and Germany are legalizing it, and it's like, oh, well,
Maybe they'll follow suit and things. How do you
well,
think, like in the UK, because you're saying there's such a few patient count, what do you
mm.
think, what could be, how does society, or how do you get, making medical marijuana and medical cannabis in the UK more visible? How do you think how do they go about doing that?
Well, I think there's certain things. I mean, the clinics themselves are, and a lot of the kind of advocacy and patient groups are kind of, they are united in their vision, but kind of, divided in their kind of efforts. And I feel like there needs to be something that brings them all together. I mean, I've been looking at sort of launching a campaign where that everyone can get behind. I mean, it's still very much in the kind of early stages of it, but I feel like there needs to be that kind of general public awareness raising, whether it be a kind of marketing campaign or whether it be, or we have to come from all sides. We have to go and take it to people in the street and say, hey, actually, let's do a kind of activation. Let's show people actually medical cannabis isn't evil. It's legal. It can be accessed in on certain circumstances. Let's just go out and start telling people that and showing it to them and, letting them know that this is a thing. I think it's too easy to kind of remain in the canna bubble
Yeah,
that, we're all, and I'm sure that's
that's
true
everywhere. You
in
can
all
totally
places
see it.
everywhere. I mean, that's it. It's like we're all preaching to the converted. We don't, need to tell each other about,
Well, all the
how
benefits. I mean,
important this is.
I've had people on the podcast, and I had a U.S. vet that lost his leg, part of his arm, half his hand, and he was
Oh,
talking about. I think it's just awareness, people telling their story. As people tell the
yes.
story and how the benefits of it, he was going to the VA, and again, the VA does provide medical care, but sometimes it's not for
Hmm.
certain things. It's not great. The VA is
Oh,
the veterans hospitals that take care of our vets
yeah.
here. They get free care, but it comes with all sorts of stipulations. They had him, I think he was on like 20 or 25 different pills, something to wake up,
Mm.
something to go to sleep, something to help him go to the bathroom, something to not go to the bathroom, something for pain, but the pain had to help him with something else. And he was
Yeah.
on all these
No,
pills.
no.
He says, and I wanted to try cannabis, and the VA doesn't prescribe it. So he's a huge advocate. He started a foundation, and he speaks at all these, I'll call it
Oh,
cannabis
wow. It's
conferences,
amazing.
and he goes out there as a vet. And he was funny. He was talking about when he tries to get an ear with government officials, says the majority of the time, he says, I'm a vet. I go in there with my metal leg and a half an arm and a half a hand. They give me an audience because he says, like, this guy fought for
No,
the country, and he
but that's
lived
it. I
in,
mean,
and like you
there's
need some advocacy, like you said, like
100%.
with some visual people saying, hey, or not, maybe it's not super public, maybe it is celebrities. I don't know who it is, but they start
No.
advocating towards it, and it
Well,
starts bringing
I think there's a
awareness.
couple of things here. I mean, again, here in the UK, the reason the law got changed is because of the efforts of a couple of mothers who were advocating on behalf of their children to get medical
Here we
cannabis
are.
for for their severe cases of epilepsy, and in particular, Hannah Deacon is very much part of the industry now in terms of trying to push it through for everybody else in terms of the medical cannabis side of things, which is fantastic. And we have a lot of these again very compelling stories about people's whose lives have been transformed. Speaking to a lady who's she talks about all of her different symptoms, and the only thing that keeps her sane, she's tried all the other things, tried the pills, tried this,
Yep.
feels like a zombie, but cannabis allows her to drastically improves her quality of life. But it's almost like, as powerful as those stories are and as essential to tell as they are, do most people look at them and say, okay, well, I understand for those kind of extreme circumstances that it's essential for people to have access to that medication. But what about people with just, you know, bad joints, not bad joints, but
Yeah.
the
No pun
bad.
intended.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But people with your usual aches and pains and things like that who could really benefit from it. They don't see themselves within that kind of narrative. Where is it for the sort of boomers who are looking at doing all that,
No,
getting
I
by, got
agree with you.
rheumatoid, and they've got this, they've got that, and it doesn't cure things, but it makes life a lot more bearable. Where as a muscle relaxant, so
Well, and it's an all natural medicine, and people are starting to. I think
yeah.
it's getting as it becomes more of it, like you were saying, like a global and worldwide play, and all the health benefits
Mm.
versus
Yeah.
the chemically made medicine. And I'm not discounting chemically made medicine.
No, no, no.
There's purpose for it, but if someone's not feeling well, or they're down in the dumps, or they feel like,
Hmm.
but I think there's this, like you say, there's like this stigma, like, oh my goodness, like
Yeah.
they don't want to tell anybody, or but I feel it's swaying and starting to change, because you hear these, like, I'll just say, like, there'll be a bachelor party or bachelorette party, and the girls are going to they're going to get some gummies, and they're going to have some gummies instead of drinking 5 gallons of wine, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's like a different journey for them, and they're talking about it
It's
like
a
as,
different vibe, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a totally different social cue of what they're doing, and it's, you don't, I was saying before, like, you don't hear people like getting so They get hungry, happy, sleepy.
Yeah.
Then I hate to oversimplify it, but I mean, that's the
Yeah.
kind of
No.
thing. And then too, like then all the medicinal side of it that helps with all the people that there's just so many health benefits to try. I mean, I feel like I wish it was more people would be open-minded or willing to try it for their ailments.
Yeah. But
And
that's
there's
it.
so
But
many
it's
people that are helping with the journey too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, spoken to, cannabis nurses and, doctors and talking about, different healthcare professionals who are, going out there and telling people that cannabis isn't evil and it could help them. They should definitely do it. I think, again, it's how do we break out of that bubble? How do we talk to different charities and different, for example, when I went to the medical cannabis, what was it? Um, there was it was the it's back in November last year. Went to this medical cannabis summit basically in London, and speaking to a lot of different people and hearing their stories and talking about what I don't think one in particular was a charity that it was a condition called EDS, which is to do with again to do with people's joints and how
Okay.
they feel and things, and talking about the charity who didn't necessarily have any particular affiliation or loyalty towards cannabis, and they were getting inquiries from their community asking about it. It's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I think it's called EDS. Yeah. So they were talking, they were starting to get inquiries. So that started. So it was almost like the patients were not putting pressure, but they were making these inquiries to the charity about, what do you think of this? What are your thoughts around it? So again, there's an education piece with the kind of wider community. And I think it's how do we branch out, isn't it? How do we talk to, healthcare professionals or other charities who were talking about the different treatments that their patients and their patient community are kind of trying and facilitating that and educating and informing and again telling people that again there's the realism about it. Let's not think that it's a panacea for everything, but again it can do a lot of good. And I think it's almost like how do you take the stigma from we don't smoke cannabis, it's bad, blah blah blah, to actually try it. It could make it could make a real difference. And I think that's where a lot of the stigma, I think that's it's that disconnect, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like how can cannabis be something to be enjoyed recreationally and it's
There's
saving
like to say,
lives.
yeah.
It's in, I think that's again for me that's something I constantly ask myself, how do we connect those two things? Is it that it's all therapeutic? But I think again it's hard to quantify. I think that's the problem. It's hard to kind of put it in a nice neat little box like we can with a lot of different things.
Yeah,
But
for sure. Do you think, is there any limitations in the UK on branding and marketing? Are they allowed to do ad campaigns? Are there TV programs? Because I remember, like, as a kid growing up in
yeah,
the 80s, I was born in the 70s, but in the 80s, it's don't do drugs. You saw the things, don't do drugs. This is your
yeah.
brand, this is your brand on drugs, any question type thing, two eggs frying in a pan. I
I
wonder if
mean,
there's any like advocacy groups that does the UK allow? Because I know that from state to state here, like even I live
mhm.
in Rhode Island, and local cannabis companies can't advertise on the billboard, but an out-of-state company can, which that
Again,
makes
ask
crazy
about
sense.
face.
It's
Yeah,
wild. Like it's
I
just wild.
know.
So I was just wondering, are they allowed to? Is there like advocacy groups that are able to put up a
I
signed
mean,
billboard or a
what has
campaign?
happened? What I've seen recently. So again, I've been looking into this more and more, and I've been having conversations with like a digital billboard company, and how do we kind of navigate this? And I think again, there are fairly stringent rules about about using the word cannabis and the context in which you use it, and about making healthcare claims and things like that. You can't sort of go, "Hey, cannabis, it could really help you, and change your life." You can't kind of go out and say those sorts of things. But what there has been actually, there was a Curaleaf did a advertising campaign here in the UK, and I've seen it on the TV. It's basically people talking about everything apart from cannabis. It was just kind of like patients almost like having a conversation. You see them on camera just going,
Interesting.
so I don't have to smoke it. Or it's like, and it's legal. Or, so you know what they're talking about. And then you see the Curaleaf logo pop up. So, you clock it. Even if you didn't know what it's about, you could probably
Yeah, they're
get a
not
good
saying the
idea.
word. That's like almost like in any type of marketing,
Exactly.
like
But I met the guy from Curaleaf in The Hague, and I was, saying, oh, good work on that campaign. He said it took us a year to get that approved. A
from
year,
the country, from the UK government.
Yeah, well, from the advertising standards, I guess the whole process of navigating all of that
Wow.
took a year, and it's so kind of innocuous almost, the campaign, because it's just people talking about something, like but not saying what they're talking about. So that
Yep.
kind of gives you some idea. I think another clinic did something around 420 from past week,
Yep.
in which they had a digital billboard in London, sort of saying illegal cannabis is dead, and then they were sort of on the street corner in London where the billboard was with an arrow saying don't pick up here. So again, I thought that's quite daring because it speaks to, you see what,
Brilliant
again,
marketing.
great. I mean, again, I've seen things, so different things like that are happening. But again, for me, it's like, well, there's a line somewhere. No one quite knows what it is. It's just how do we navigate that and sort of almost have those conversations with the rule makers around what we can and can't say. And again, that's probably why it took Curaleaf a year to get that ad approved
Yeah,
because
for sure. What do you see, like, do you, what are the challenges, like, I'm just thinking, like, what do you see some of the challenges of, like, building brands in the, like, the highly regulated market?
I
What do
think it, I think it's just a case of, well, it's you've kind of got to know your market. You've got to kind of, I mean, that's always essential with anything, isn't it? With any kind of marketing endeavor, you need to understand who your market are, what they're motivated by, and what's gonna, how can you best serve them? I think that's what it comes down to. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that for
you, yeah,
not just in cannabis, but in any industry. We work with a lot of tech firms as well in my other business. And again, one of the things we talk about what we do is like, okay, we get that you're really smart people. You're building these amazing pieces of software that,
oh yeah,
frankly, are game changing in many respects. But if you can't sell it, if you can't tell the CEO of, your target, company, how it's going to make them money, save them time, and reduce, overheads more broadly, whereas there's no kind of way of doing that. How do we do that with cannabis? I suppose it's being able to talk about what it does. And so I think this is why, digital marketing is becoming more and more important. Websites and, apps. And, there's a new app here in the UK, Script Assist, in which, it's kind of agnostic, but it takes people through the process of, how to get a medical cannabis prescription. It's things like that. It has to come from this education angle. And I think that it's almost like the picks and shovels brands can make more of an impact, I think, publicly, because they're not, you know, they're not affected by the things that actual cannabis producing or plant touching or the medical community are facing in the same way. But I think again it comes back to you know how does the whole landscape shake out? It's very different in every country, and I guess in different states as well. In the US, it's
oh for
okay. How
sure.
do we do this? So it's got to be the doctors need to get on board. I've been to kind of workshops with medical professionals, highly trained doctors. They know nothing about. They're going to cannabis 101 workshops because they just not. It's not in their vocabulary.
Yeah,
It's not
they
in
don't really
their
talk about it.
teaching, their training. It's not something that they're been taught. It's one pill, one cure. How do we? That's what the medical community are used to, and
Well,
that's
even in
going to
that
take
case,
a
though,
lot.
too, how many times
Yeah,
have you been to a physician, or I have too, like, or in your
yeah,
family, they say, well, we're going to try this one medicine and we'll see how it goes.
yeah,
Did you feel better? Did it not feel better? Like, so they're
yeah.
still, even with Western medicine and chemical
Mm,
medicine, they're still trying to figure some stuff out. They've done trials, they've done stuff, but
mm,
it doesn't work for everyone, just like different strains and different cannabis won't, so I think
hmm.
there's so many naysayers in society that are saying, oh, geez, well, I don't, how do I know it'll work for me? You don't until you try it. And you haven't
Well, that
really,
yeah, you're
and
very,
sometimes
very
you have to
right.
try
Yeah,
a few different strains because there'll be it's person dependent and strain dependent, like how they feel afterwards.
yeah,
Did it help them fall asleep? Did it help did it make their pain go away? If, like, I have an aunt that has MS and she takes it because she couldn't sleep at night. She wasn't taking it to fall asleep. She had the restless leg. So her legs are shaking like crazy when she's trying to go to bed, and that's keeping her up at night. So instead of taking a bunch of pills, she takes a vape pen, takes a couple puffs of that, an hour before
yeah.
bed. She goes right to
That's
sleep and doesn't
amazing.
wake up with leg tremors. It's one of those, is that going to be for everyone? No, but I'm glad, I'm glad she tried it. It's,
Absolutely.
there's nothing wrong with that. Like, and you're not considering, and I think that, again, it goes back to that stigmatism of people like, oh yeah,
Mm.
they're potheads or whatever. They're
Yeah.
smoking weed and getting banged up. Where she's like, when you talk to her, she's not getting, in quotes, stoned. She's taking it as a medical, and it's taking a few puffs and seeing how I feel, and then all of a sudden it's night nights.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's again, this comes back to how do you kind of reconcile that with, what cannabis has known for. So yeah, there is that stigma, from 100 years of prohibition.
Oh God.
That will change in time. That will change in time. I truly believe that. But again, it is
I think
about
you're right.
putting
I
out there
feel like
is
we're
that,
still early on, and even though legal cannabis and medical cannabis has been around
yeah.
now for a good, what, 10 or 15 years,
Well,
It's
5 years
still
in the UK, yeah, but no one. We've had 5 years of it. It's been 20, well, nearly six. It's been since 2018. We've had medical cannabis legal, and still
it
little
still hasn't
progress it
caught
seems
on,
to have
which
been
is that
made.
that is kind of it's kind of mind-boggling. I bet you people just don't, or they know, but they're afraid. Or like I think even here when it first became like medical use in each state, and you had to go to your physician and then like get a prescription, and then not a prescription, a medical card, and the medical card is good
Yeah,
for a year. You pay the whatever the 50 or $100.
yeah,
I think people were afraid at first, and other people were like, "This is great. Now I've got a license to go buy weed."
yeah.
But
Well, again, I think again, I've heard that compared to the sort of obstacles that we face here in the US, it's like my back, have a medical card. Okay, cool. I can go buy my part and feel better. Great. I'm all for that. I think again, it's just not that clear cut here. It's still the kind of how do I do it? It's you almost kind of unless you're kind of committed to the process. And I was at the time when I went through it. It's kind of like, well, because you have to link your own medical record. So there's like, okay, so my GP is going to see that I'm taking medical cannabis, even though I'm with a private clinic. What's that going to do? Are they going to call me out on it? There's the uncertainty around it. You know,
does it disqualify you for anything on your standard care?
no, it doesn't. But again, who's to say? Who knows
Yeah,
that?
they
There's
could
so
all of a sudden
there's
someone
so many
just doesn't care for it and they just create.
exactly. Or the doctor be like, well, you're taking this cannabis, so what do I need to give you that for? And you're like, well, actually, I kind of want to see how both of them, and you're going to have to tell them that that's the case, and so it's only through understanding, and this is why when I speak to a lot of the advocacy groups, you find the patients have such a sophisticated knowledge of what works for them and what cannabis strains are and what
Agreed.
what form factors they're taking. It's almost like it surpasses a lot of the medical professionals in terms of the knowledge they have about the products. But I
On the
mean, what I would
education
like,
side,
yeah,
it's all about education on them.
exactly. So it's kind of education for medical professionals as well as the kind of general public, as well as trying to kind of reduce the obstacles in terms of what it takes to access medical cannabis and raising awareness. So there's quite a few things sort of standing in the way, but again, it only takes a sort of tweak in legislation to undo one of those things to make, whether it be something like descheduling in the US or something like that, that allows it to be used in medical trials, or, it's not an illicit narcotic as, in the same vein as a heroin or something like that.
I know
It's
they love to
those
put
sorts.
stuff in buckets, don't they? They like to categorize it all together when
Well,
it's
it's almost like you're going from a 1 to a 3, or, category A to a category C or B or something like we have in the UK, that goes, well, actually, that means we can do so much more. And that gives people more, gives them access, but also gives them, there's always that harm reduction aspect baked into it. It's like, this means it can be used in medical trials. Therefore, that provides an incentive for companies to go, well, actually, let's see what we can do with this. Let's try it out. Let's put the research out there and prove to people that it is going to have a positive effect.
Yep,
So
I agree.
it's things, I mean, it's a minefield. It's always going to be, but I think, again, this is the kind of, for me, this is the kind of fun challenge, figuring out what we can do rather than what we can't. And I think, again, this is why only the lawyers are making money in cannabis here in the
Oh
UK,
God.
because
Oh,
they're the only ones who can go, well, they didn't technically say we couldn't do that. So let's do,
I
under
was
advisement,
I was at a conference in the state. So a law was written for a fund, and I'll leave the state nameless, that they are creating grants, and you have to apply for a grant, and you got some free money. If you got grant money, you get whatever, 100,000 up front
nice.
after all your applications are approved. And then
Hmm.
after you're operational, you get an additional maybe 100, 125,000. Okay,
Right.
great. You're not allowed to use any of that money to build out a facility, a dispensary, manufacturing, a delivery, or a cultivation. You can only use it to pay off planning, lawyers, accountants, and I
Okay.
guess
All the
maybe
kind of,
some professional. It was like it was geared towards professional services, and I'm thinking, so the attorneys created a grant through the state fund in order for them to get paid back. I'm like, brilliant. I mean, brilliant idea, but
I heard a really interesting terminology earlier. So this is tend to be using in the tech space, but again, it's called enshittification. So it's basically messing things up to suit your own agenda. So again, when you think about what a lot of social media platforms have done, you have a kind of lowball offer, you get the critical mass of users, then you kind of sideline the users' needs for the business, the investment need. And then once you've got enough money coming in, then you just stick two fingers up at both of them and say, actually, this is ours now. We own this. This is and you take the money for yourself. So that's where the value, and it's I always like to think, and again, this is the kind of eternal naive optimist, is that cannabis has an opportunity to do things differently and operate more ethically, but
Yeah,
in the halls of power, I suppose it's every every dog for themselves in that regard.
for sure,
But
for sure. What do you
it's
feel? I know I'm just looking at the time, like, wow, like we
yeah, no, no,
chatted
man,
and 45 minutes goes by.
awesome.
What do you like? How can people get a hold of you, or how? I know we'll put things on the chat, but what
Yeah,
if someone was to wanted to reach out for your services and what you could
mhm,
do for them? What is like if you were to give a, the 1 minute
sure.
elevator speech of, or this is what I do and how I can help you, and then people could reach out to you. What would
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
say is a good, just a good intro to you, and like how can people, like if they're looking for help either in advocacy or in
Yeah, I
marketing
mean,
or
for
in
sure.
branding?
For sure. So again, so our website, it's www.thermidor.wtf. Everyone likes the fact that
I
that's
love
our
that.
domain name, which is cool. And they often ask what it means, and I can tell them something different every time. Also got the Lobster Pot podcast, which you'll find on YouTube and on all the major kind of podcast platforms again, like on Spotify and things like that. In
Wonderful.
terms of what we can do, if you're looking for help with articulating your offer, whether it be kind of doing something around blogs or web copy or white papers, something of that nature, editorial focused, or if you're looking for videos of your facility or something like that, you're looking to kind of create a whole raft of materials that will showcase your company, whether you be TSRgrow, whether you be a new cannabis facility opening up in wherever, if you're looking for content, if you're looking at showcasing what your products do, give us a call. That's the sort of thing we're well versed in, and stuff we want to do more of. But again, I'm always keen to hear from people from obscure parts of the world who are kind of waving the cannabis flag and trying to make change, because whether you're in North Korea, Uzbekistan, or wherever, if you're out there trying to figure out how to build a cannabis industry, then let's talk, because it's just again, we all in this together in
We really
some
are.
ways. So we need, so if I can't help, then I probably know someone who does. So, let's connect. And I'd love to hear stories from people who are doing their bit and trying to make it happen. And yeah,
I love it.
so
Well, this has been great. Thank you, Dave.
yeah, thank you so
Jumping on the
much.
phone, jumping on the podcast with us. This is Dave Barton with the Thermidor, and he's a creative director for Thermidor. And if someone wants to reach out, we'll post all of his information on our page. And then when we launch the podcast, it'll be able to, people will get out there and learn more about you. But thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you, Tony. And yeah, we will speak soon, sir.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thanks.
All the best.
Take care.
Cheers.